Last night, Curtis and myself and my incredible editor, Dan Alpert, were out to dinner. And we were just talking about revising the first book. And both Curtis and I are sitting there engaged in the conversation and also knowing that both of us have to come back to the hotel and write our speech. And so I get back to the hotel, and I am just stressed out because the notice I got from School Improvement Network was that this is the Innovation Summit. So don't do what you normally do. You don't get your computer, you don't get a desk, you get a circle and your face on here. And so I played along. I said, okay, I'm going to do that. And last night I'm sitting there stressing and everything goes through my mind. A decade ago, I'm in Denver doing my first keynote. First time ever using PowerPoint. And it finishes and the people are very gracious and they come up and this woman comes from nowhere. And she is a mess. She's got makeup running all down her eyes. She's crying. And she tells me, I love you. And I said, who are you? And she just starts, I'm Blanche Linton. And I want to make a video about you. I said, a video? Yeah, my company's the Video Journal of Education, and we want to do a video, and I know you can do it, so I'll call you. Okay. She started my career. And Closing the Achievement Gap became a video where we told this story that Portland tried to tell just there. And from that day and to Portland last year, a man by the name of John Crossman, who is the only person I trust to shoot our work, and Curtis Linton directing, began to tell this story to the nation. And in that Closing the Achievement video, you saw people who are sitting in this room. Curtis took my speech this morning. You saw Jamie Almansan doing the first collaborative action research for equity work in the classroom. You saw Greg Meyer leading a group of educators down in Chapel Hill. And we filmed together John Linton, Blanche Linton, Curtis Linton, and Trent Linton. So the first time we're in Oakland and we do a training and no one is able to talk and we're busy and we just do it and they pack up their stuff and go home and then we come back the second day, they pack up their stuff, fly back to Salt Lake City. Next time we're together, we're in Denver and we're doing a one-day training and it's just a mess. We're in a room that had a wedding over the weekend, so there's confetti and sparkles all over the chair. I'm sitting in the chair, then getting filmed. The film has sparkles all over it, right? Third time we're down in Chapel Hill. It's a day of working with equity teams. And we finally get to break bread together. And this is the first time that we have a conversation. Now, Blanche loves me, okay, and she's pulled her whole family into this. And they don't know what they're into. But Curtis is at that point living in LA. He's a film student. He kind of gets it. But Trent is about to go off to the Gulf. And so he's kind of confused as to what we're doing here and why we're talking so much about race. He's quiet. We give Trent some shrimp and grits and he's happy. And then there is John Linton, the father, the senior, the patriarch. And he's looking at me with what I call, in courageous conversation, pre-verbal tension. Meaning he has something he needs to say to me, but he can't quite figure out how to say it. John and I have been having that same conversation up until yesterday in this room. And that's what I believe this is. My possibility in the world is that everybody will be able to talk about race. And it won't be stressful. It won't cause blame, shame, any of those things. It will just allow us to move forward as human beings. So last night I'm sitting up in my room and stressed out, CNN's blaring in the background, and I noticed something. I'm like, wow, have you noticed? That if I had a son, he would look like Trayvon. Now hold that moment. Don't go where you normally go. Hold yourself. Stop. Remember my possibility. Many people refer to in the video this compass. And too often, as soon as we hear what's going on, we go to a reactive spot. Don't react. Keep yourself from reacting. Also, we go to a thinking spot. Don't think. Keep yourself from deeply thinking. Go to the feeling spot. Go to the believing spot. Back to the feeling spot. Back to the believing spot. And hold yourself in that internal space rather than react externally. Get in touch with why you're feeling the way you're feeling. And take care of yourself. Because whatever you're feeling, you are supposed to be feeling. Now I'm going to put another boundary on that feeling. Do not allow yourself to feel too deeply about anything other than what I just said. That is, don't stroll the history. Don't go way back into the past. Because there is nothing we can do about that. But what you can do is just think about your feelings connected to the fact that if I had a son, he would look like Trayvon. And what that means to you. Sankofa simply means embrace the past, but stay focused on the future. Our challenge around race is we continuously bring too much of our past into our present, and it determines our future. We don't have to do that. Our kids are with us right now, and issues are happening every single day that we need to give all of our energy and all of our strength to the present. And so, to be innovative at the summit, I'm going to give you something that's not in either of the books. No video, no keynote before. Honestly, I thought about how to bring this group in Salt Lake City to a place different and through a process different than I've ever done before. And so there are 4 steps here. First is to notice. Second is to engage. Third is to understand. And fourth is to empathize. And it goes like this. To notice simply means to ask yourself what's happening here from a racial standpoint. What's happening here? And it's very simple, not in the past, but right now. And so I'll stroll some what's happening nows for you. Okay? In government, 4 out of the 100 spots that the Senate occupies are people of color. Okay? Now remember, don't go to the intellectual quadrant because today that number could be 5, it could be 6, it could be 2. But the point is not the actual number. The point is the feeling that there's so few. And how does that feel? What does that mean? In our Fortune 500 companies, 6 African Americans, 6 Latinos, currently CEOs. And in the history of the Fortune 500, no more than 13 African American folks have led. What does that feel like? And if you struggle to find the feeling, you're probably thinking too much. You're probably too far back in the past. Just at this moment, 2013. In healthcare, more than 100 studies have been produced in the last decade that indicate that the stress of racism inflicted on people of color is more severe than obesity and smoking. What does that feel like? Think about the people sitting next to you. The criminal justice system, and many of us are familiar with this. These numbers are staggering of African American males incarcerated, Latino males incarcerated, and the radical gap between black and brown men and white men. Again, no history, right here in the moment. And then finally in education, of the 50 states, 38 of those states boast African American males being at the bottom. 11 states show our Latino students at the absolute bottom. This is still our experience. And so once we notice, then we engage. And engage simply means to notice how you're feeling. What feelings come forward for you because of this? And so we can't help but miss this on TV because it's so much. But we watch another, as they call it, case of the century. And to be oblivious to this is to turn ourselves off from our humanity. And so the only question when I engage is, why did George Zimmerman pursue Trayvon Martin in the first place? Had he not done that, Trayvon Martin would be alive. And whatever lapse in judgment, because we know that Trayvon Martin is not a robber, he's an honors student, 3.7 GPA. And we know that whatever he does as a little boy, growing up into a teenager, so many of the people viewing their own teenagers at home have done the same things. And that does not, anything that he has done, serve as reason for him to not be with us right now. And so to understand that is really important once I engage. And so I want to understand, what personal meaning do I draw from these feelings? What's being created for me? And I have a long history of making those associations. So I just stroll you back really quickly, growing up in Baltimore, Maryland. Once knowing, or not realizing actually, that there were people who existed who were not black. A powerful contrast to being in Salt Lake. And yet I'm here with you, doing the talk of my life. And so we can do this. But between 6th grade and 7th grade, things changed so that I wouldn't be a part of the educational statistic that you see. So for whatever reason, my family had an ability to move me from Baltimore City public schools and into this private school. And overnight, my world went from Baltimore to Salt Lake. Okay? Now, once again, stay in the feeling of the present. Okay? No matter what we want to think about, Salt Lake is not as diverse as Baltimore. That's all. No history, no other things, because when you bring that in, then it starts tension. And we don't need that. It's just if I came to Salt Lake from Baltimore, there would be big changes in my experience. And finally, once engaging around that and understanding it, I moved to this last place of understanding what it means to navigate that environment. And what I discovered in terms of what it means to navigate that environment is that I needed something else. We need something other than understanding to challenge the data that we're seeing in our schools. Now, yesterday when Chet spoke, I got really nervous. I've always had a philosophy that you can't do something virtually that you have not done humanly. And so I worry about the courageous conversation online because people hide. How many of us have read blogs by Anonymous? That person's really busy and needs a lot of work. And in any event here, what I'm saying is that we wouldn't know her if it weren't for technology and globalization. Who has time to worry about Paula Deen and what she said a long time ago? And how about if everyone at the Food Network who's ever said anything like that, connected, also quit their job? And Walmart and every other sponsor for that matter. So I'm talking about Paula Deen in a way very different than the conversations that I've heard around the country, because lots of times people like to find a person who has done something that they once did or thought about doing, and they get in trouble for it, and then it's like, okay, good, we've taken care of it. Whereas I don't see Paula Deen's mistake as any more radical than the mistakes that I've made, perhaps the mistakes that you've made. And so, this thing that we need, this fourth dimension here, is so important. Once we notice, and this morning, how powerful to have Erica lead us into noticing that our Congress can't figure it out. And we need to figure it out because she's going to be president. But as we look through this, in the same period of July, we don't have to look to the past. We don't have to talk about enslavement, internment, all of those things. Because we've got the Supreme Court right now gutting voters' rights when we know in the last election folks had trouble voting. Gutting affirmative action when we are the developed nation that lags behind all other developed nations in graduating students from college with the preeminent higher education system. And we've got hundreds of children this month of color dead on our streets. And although it's globalization, we're not getting that story. And so why do we know about Paula Deen, but we don't know about these things? In the moment, how are we feeling? Engage, understand, and last, empathize. And so empathize simply means to notice, to feel, and to go to that place where you are in that emotion of the person who has the experience radically different than yours. I'm empathizing right now. I'm empathizing, and I wish that George Zimmerman could. I know he thinks he did the right thing, but it couldn't have been the right thing because an innocent boy is dead now. Empathize with Paula Deen. I know she thinks she was doing the right thing, but she hurt people in her organization right now. And so when I talk about have you noticed, and I indicate to you that I've noticed that he would reflect my son. And I move to that place of what that means in school language. Would my son have a safe place? Would my son have teachers who get him culturally? Would my son be offered the curriculum that positively supports him? Most importantly, would my son meet high expectations? And would my son be treated with love, dignity, and respect? I close out by indicating that this courageous conversation about race at one time was an adult conversation. What has been the proudest moment for me here is to see this second generation of students who have benefited. I know that Greg Meyer taught these students and Chapel Hill schools to engage this conversation. And you heard from Jotham yesterday that when the teacher engages this conversation, magic happens. Magic happens. So you no longer have to listen to the adults. We can listen to our students. They've told us. I ask, have you noticed? And if you haven't, join me in my session, and I will help you to do so. Thank you.